I have to ask, did either of you ever dress up for a Rocky Horror screening? I did.
I've been to those, but I never participated.
Dressed up, brought toast to throw at the screen, whole 9 yards, begged my parents to let me go to a midnight screening. Welcome to Daily Variety, your daily dose of news and analysis for entertainment industry insiders. It's Tuesday, November 25th, 2025. I'm your host, Cynthia Littleton. I am co-editor-in-chief of Variety alongside Ramin Satuda. I'm in LA, he's in New York, and Variety has reporters around the world covering the business of entertainment. In today's episode, we yuck it up. We talk with Variety's chief film critics, Owen Gleiberman and Peter Debruge. The two have just assembled the 100 Best Comedy Movies of All Time list that published on Variety.com and is in Variety's November 26th print edition. Owen and Peter dive into the how and why of their great selections in a very animated conversation. But before we get to that, here are a few headlines just in this morning that you need to know. Scarlett Johansson is following in Linda Blair's footsteps. She'll star in a new Exorcist movie from Universal and Blumhouse. Mike Flanagan is writing and directing. India's Reliance Animation is producing a scripted series about Argentine soccer great Diego Maradona. The company is working with the late star's family. My colleague Naman Ramachandran has the scoop. Speaking of the Global Village, Disney Entertainment co-chair Dana Walden received the Founders Award on Monday night at the International Emmy Awards. Ryan Murphy presented her the honor. Walden told the crowd in New York that she believes in the strong bond that, quote, exists between the creator who dreams the dream and the team that believes in it enough to clear the path. All of these stories and so much more can be found on Variety.com right now. And now it's time for conversations with Variety journalists about news and trends in show business. By now, listeners probably know that Variety chose By Now Most Daily Variety Squad as our #1 comedy movie of all time. It's an unconventional choice. I love it. It's not predictable. The 1988 release came from the zany, raunchy trio of Jerry Zucker, Jim Abrams, and David Zucker, or ZAZ, or Zaz as they're sometimes known. The Naked Gun had its origins in the Zaz-produced ABC TV series Police Squad. That was a relentless spoof of TV cop shows. Police Squad introduced Leslie Nielsen as the Lieutenant Frank Drebin character. It ran for all of 6 episodes in 1982, but it was the Velvet Underground of TV series because it inspired a generation of comedy writers to get weird and bend the form. And 6 years after Police Squad, the concept was adapted into a feature film starring Nielsen and Priscilla Presley. Here's a clip from the Police Squad series that captures the fast-paced, gag-filled style that marked Police Squad and later The Naked Gun. It's a spoof of the stereotypical police interview of the victim. Here's Leslie Nielsen, his co-star Alex North, and an actress I can't quite identify.
I'm Captain Frank Drebin. I understand you had a pretty rough time.
Yeah, it was pretty bad.
When was the first time you noticed something was wrong?
Well, when I first heard the shot, and as I turned, Jim fell.
He's a teller, Frank.
Jim Fell's a teller?
No, Jim Johnson.
Who's Jim Fell?
He's the auditor, Frank.
He had the flu, so Jim filled in.
Phil who?
Phil Din. He's the night watchman, Frank.
If only Phil had been here.
Now, wait a minute. Let me get this straight. Twice came in and shot the teller and Jim Fell.
No, he only shot the teller, Jim Johnson. Fell is ill.
Okay, then after he shot the teller, you shot twice.
No, I only shot once.
Twice is the hold-up man.
Then I guess I did shoot twice.
Well, so now you're changing your story.
The absurdity goes on forever. And now here's our conversation about the 100 best comedy movies of all time. Peter Debruge and Owen Gleiberman, Variety's intrepid chief film critics, thank you for joining me.
Thanks, Cynthia.
Good to be here, Cynthia.
Well, you two have definitely been busy. You've done some heavy lifting on a big list. It's a list designed to spark debate, discussion, social media memes. You two put your minds to assembling the 100 best comedy films of all time. That's a big assignment. It shot right to the top of our most read stories. Was there something about this year? Was there an anniversary or something that made you want to focus on comedy right now?
This was more than a year in the making, and it comes out of a series of these greatest movies lists, starting with the 100 greatest films of all time that we did a few years back. Giving ourselves this long runway really allowed us to brush up on films we hadn't watched in years, to incorporate the opinion of our colleagues. And so we really had the luxury of time to get this list right.
Mhm. Owen, what did you find most challenging about winnowing it to 100 titles?
The thing about comedy is that you really got to look at it with fresh eyes, because there are comedies that stand the test of time, and then a lot of comedy doesn't, because comedy is always about raising the bar on what is shocking and what has an edge to it. Our agenda in this list, to the extent that we had one, was to just go back to the drawing board and see all these movies with fresh eyes, and also really kind of obliterate any sense of demarcation between highbrow and lowbrow, because comedy is really the ultimate form where it's one or the other. And there's plenty of lowbrow comedies that are just completely hilarious and deserve a place on this list.
Like country music, comedy is 3 jokes and the truth. It is, you've got to hit a truth. And when you look at the indelible titles on this list, they all put a light on some hilarious, funny aspects of the human condition. The relationship comedy that is featured in the Philadelphia Story, which is one of my all-time favorite movies. I'm so glad you included it. That is timeless. That is Boy Meets Girl for all time. I'm just going to run down the top 10 listeners. Run to variety.com where you can find the list. You won't be able to miss it on our website. It's also in our precious November 25th print edition. It's a beautiful layout. The top 10 in order, starting with number 1, The Naked Gun from the Files of Police Squad, the 1988 film. That's a bold choice. Followed by Some Like It Hot, Annie Hall, The Great Dictator, Waiting for Guffman, Monty Python and the Holy Grail, Duck Soup, Fargo, Young Frankenstein, and Groundhog Day.
It makes me realize, listening to that top 10, that there's no assignment actually more fun than making a list like this, a comedy list. But I think the most fun thing about it is to see the way that certain titles jump forward into your top 10 or even to your number 1 that people aren't expecting. And we didn't do it for that reason. It's because we realize these are great comedies that now people have a certain feeling about, and they've become classics. I think The Naked Gun is like that. I mean, if this were back in 1988 and you asked someone, do you think comedies by the Marx Brothers and Charlie Chaplin are great works of art? They would go, yeah, of course. And then if you ask that same person, well, all right, what about The Naked Gun? They would probably say, well, that's a very silly movie, but it's got some great laughs in it. But our feeling about The Naked Gun and the whole airplane school of Zucker, Abrahams, and Zucker is that these guys were working on this absolutely insane and inspired level that was very much like the contemporary equivalent of the Marx Brothers. And now a movie like The Naked Gun can take its place alongside the Marx Brothers as being the media age equivalent of that.
In that top 10, I think you really see too reflected just the power of certain voices who really shaped what we think of as comedy. You know, the Zaz school there with Naked Gun and, of course, Airplane. And we have the Christopher Guest innovation with mockumentaries represented by Waiting for Guffman. Monty Python was a huge force, really on TV, but starting with Monty Python, The Holy Grail, began this wave into film. If their tagline was now for something completely different, the challenge in the movies became finding some sort of cohesive lunacy to tie everything together. Of course, Chaplin, the Marx Brothers, and let's not leave off Mel Brooks.
And it's interesting that we're doing this right now because comedies, I know from talking to Rebecca Rubin every week about the box office, traditional adult comedies are really struggling. And it strikes me that there's nothing on the top 10 that was produced later than the late 90s.
You've got movies like Bridesmaids, Everything Everywhere All at Once on the list. You've got things that were right there at the turn of the century, like Being John Malkovich, that are still reverberating today. Some of it, though, is that there's a disposability maybe to a lot of the comedy that's coming out of studios quite recently. I think that television has really stepped up.
The movie that I'm very proud is in the top 10 is Waiting for Guffman, because it's a movie I feel very close to and I just watch again and again. And it's interesting because it grows out of the same school as Spinal Tap. You could say that Spinal Tap, in spirit, even though it was directed by Rob Reiner, was the first Christopher Guest movie. It's the invention of that mockumentary form. And Spinal Tap is a hilarious movie that is on our list. But we thought Waiting for Guffman, ultimately, this one-of-a-kind movie about a small-town theater troupe with just this amazing performance by Christopher Guest as Corky St. Clair, the closeted head of the theater troupe. There is just something magical about it. And it just touches the bone of reality, almost like reality TV before its time. And so that's a movie that we found there is quite an enraptured cult for it, and we're part of the cult.
I noticed as I was going through the final list, Naked Gun was released in 1988. And as I was going through, 1988 was a hell of a year for comedies. Titles that made the list include Hairspray, A Fish Called Wanda, Big, Coming to America. There's probably a few more in there. It goes to tell you that the volume was a lot bigger, but also just the playing field was bigger because there just was less competition for movies.
I hadn't really thought about that till you mentioned it, but now that I think about it, the 80s was really a big period for comedy. It often seemed as if Hollywood would have been taken over by comedy. And it seems like as the decade went on, a lot of film artists figured out how to do it. John Waters had been playing with his post Pink Flamingos career throughout the 80s, and then he makes this great movie where he actually moves into the mainstream, and it remains just enchanting. It is really a high concept movie, and there were a lot of dopey high concept movies in the 80s, but Penny Marshall figured out how to do it artfully. So some of those movies from 88 were building on things that had been done in the years before and now just doing them better.
We were reminded this year on the 50th anniversary of two titanic movies of comedy genius. One is Monty Python and the Holy Grail, celebrating its mid-century anniversary, and also the Rocky Horror Picture Show. Those are two just iconic cult comedies that arrived at a time when it seemed like maybe audiences were really receptive to things that were major counter-programming. The Academy debuted the 4K restoration earlier this year, and it was so cool. It felt like the lunatics had taken over the asylum to see Rocky Horror play at the museum on their kind of hallowed screen.
You have a couple of key international filmmakers represented, including the great Jacques Tati, who delivers slapstick entertainment with a French twist. But how did you balance those considerations when comedy is so American?
You know, sometimes it just works differently across borders. Tati, of course, is partly because his is a silent form of comedy. Like Chaplin, he became this just beloved international figure. But I think we were very selective about the international films we did choose. Almodovar's wildest film, Women on the Verge of a Nervous Breakdown, is there. The really anarchic Bertrand Blier movie, Going Places. The one that I think really stands in for a major phenomenon is The Tall Blonde Man with One Black Shoe, because that is representative of this thing that happened in France where these high concept farces were ripe for remake. And that movie was a huge hit with Pierre Richard in its original form.
And I also think The Tall Blonde Man with One Black Shoe is a very special movie. It just came out of this time in the early 70s when that kind of French farce had become much crazier than it had ever been before. And I said in the little capsule write-up that, to me, that movie was funnier than all the Pink Panther movies put together. That was my little dig at the Pink Panther movies because I'm not so crazy about them.
Are there any other movies and maybe even some lesser known titles on the list that are really important to you?
Well, I have two of them that I was just particularly interested in having on the list. One of them is Richard Pryor Live in Concert, because I think it's a movie that a lot of people today probably haven't seen. And stand-up comedy is bigger than ever. But when it comes to stand-up comedy, Richard Pryor was, I think, unquestionably the greatest artist in that form who ever lived. So if you want to see the best stand-up comedy performance that ever existed, watch Richard Pryor Live in Concert. It really is just a great movie. The other one for me is My Best Friend's Wedding, because we are also in a rom-com centric universe. I think My Best Friend's Wedding was actually the greatest romantic comedy of its time. I remember the second time, especially, I saw that movie, I just got blown away by how incredible it is. It is so moving. It is so funny. I think it's Julia Roberts' greatest role as an actor. And I think it's a movie that still does not have the reputation that it deserves. So I was very happy to see it on this list and have people hopefully go and check it out and see how it really is a classic.
There is a director who appears on this list more than many people might expect. That's Rob Reiner, who I think is the Billy Wilder of our time, the Ernst Lubitsch of our time. Those three movies are, this is Spinal Tap, of course.
Artie Debruge.
Exactly. When Harry Met Sally, which is the movie that relaunched the rom-com. And my desert island favorite, The Princess Bride. which just is like the ultimate remix of all those funny movies from the classic era.
This gives people a lot to look for during the downtime. Thank you both so much for taking the time because, again, at this time in the world, we all need some good laughs. Really appreciate it. All of this talk about great comedies made me want to share some clips from my most recent Strictly Business podcast interview. I spoke with UTA partners Blair Cohen and Jason Heyman about the business of comedy, from stand-up to showrunners to directors and writers. They addressed the challenges that the genre faces, and they pointed to where they see a lot of growth. Here are some excerpts from that conversation, published last week on our companion long-form interview podcast, Strictly Business.
Can Modern Family exist again? Can Everybody Loves Raymond exist? It's a really good question. The good side of it is that schedule, that routine that we all grew up with of, pilot season and upfronts and fall schedule and all of that, right? That's all gone. So you have a little more flexibility, and the talent can go off to do other things, come back when they feel creatively inspired. And there's something great about that you're not just churning it out based on, existential things, that you actually, the creative ambition and what the creator is feeling they want to put out there, they can do it on their terms.
I think people want to laugh in community. I think what's driving this live experience is being together in a room and laughing together. And that was what, when we talk about all these great movies, these great comedies of the last 25, 50, however many years, it was going to the theater and laughing in community. And I think we are missing that.
In the old days where the holy grail was the half-hour network show or a movie, now so many of our clients, they had 20 different things. They can do a podcast, they can write books. They have so many things to explore their passion. That isn't the holy grail. We just want to provide them with every possible opportunity, even things they're not thinking about.
As we close out today's episode, here's a few things we're watching for. Today, we unveiled that Elton John is Variety's Philanthropist of the Year. He's raised more than $650 million for the Elton John AIDS Foundation over the past few decades, and he does a whole lot more. We have a great interview with Elton by our own Chris Willman. In case you hadn't heard, the first hunk of Stranger Things final season episodes drop tomorrow on Netflix. We have everything you need to know about this at Variety.com. And tomorrow on Daily Variety, we'll hear from Ike Barinholtz. He's helping the Motion Picture and Television Fund raise money for its second act capital campaign. Barinholtz explains his personal connection to the MPTF, and of course he answers the question, what would Sal Saperstein do to support this great industry institution? Jean Herschel would be so proud. Once again, we'd love to hear from our listeners on Variety's core podcasts, Daily Variety, Strictly Business, Award Circuit, and Variety Confidential. So please send feedback to podcasts@variety.com. That's podcasts@variety.com. Before we go, congrats to Moira Hogan. She's been appointed Executive VP of Sales for the Asia Pacific region of ITV Studios. She'll lead sales teams out of Singapore and Sydney. She was most recently part of the team that launched BritBox Australia. Thanks for listening. This episode was written and reported by me, Cynthia Littleton, with contributions from Peter Debruge and Owen Gleiberman. Sticks, nicks, hick picks. Please leave us a review at the podcast platform of your choice. And please tune in tomorrow for another episode of Daily Variety. And don't forget to tell us what you think at podcasts@variety.com. It's Tuesday, November 25th, 2025.